Welcome to the next episode of DecentMed Spotlight. Today we're here with two providers. The first one is Dr. Kristen Barnes. She is the founder of the Alternative Flight Plan podcast. She's also a veteran. She's a naturopathic doctor, and she has a multimodal approach. Jim Pekonen. Jim Pekonen also has a YouTube channel. It's Amazing Life Design. He helps men that are late teen to early 20s overcome trauma. A lot of men are afraid to talk about it. We live in a world in which people tell men, especially young men, to just shut up and deal with it. So someone like Jim is very, very valuable for young men. Jim and Dr. Barnes, thank you for being here today.
Sure, I'll start. Dr. Kristen Barnes. I am out on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State. I had a 23-year career in the Navy flying aircraft off of aircraft carriers. Ended up going to medical school after I retired because I was looking for something that would fill my soul instead of just fill my bank account. And so I ended up in Seattle going to school, and that's how I ended up staying here. A lot of my work is focused around veterans and helping veterans come back to vitality from trauma. And that's a lot to unpack just right there. So most of that work I do is my volunteer work. I'm involved in a couple of nonprofits that help provide grants to veterans for counter-strain therapy. We'll get into that. And psychedelic assisted therapy. And then in my daily life, working in Port Townsend with the community here, I am basically a generalist, and I focus on anything that might be contributing to chronic pain. So that's me in a nutshell.
Let me introduce myself, but first let me say, Dr. Barnes, thank you for your service. And I love what you said. Thank you for picking something that is filling your heart and soul, not just your pocketbook. My name is Jim Pekonen. I'm a life architect. In December, I will have been doing this 20 years. I started out in addiction recovery. I spent 12 to 14 years working in addiction recovery facilities, then went on to assisting businesses where oftentimes I would work with the owners and their spouses. And then I started working with their young people. So right now, my focus is on young men from their mid to late teens to their late 20s to get them to not only understand how they create this experience called life, but to process whatever traumas they have. And as one mother explained it to me in a referral she gave me, in working together, her son received the wisdom of his grandfather while he was in his late 20s.
Something that Dr. Barnes said that was very interesting was she brought up the word vitality. Both Dr. Barnes and Jim will be speaking at our summit on 12/12 and 12/13, the DecentMed Summit. And one element, or the major element of that summit, is experience vitality. So can you guys both speak on what is vitality to you? And we'll start with you, Dr. Barnes.
I think from my own lived experience, vitality is having the ability to get the most out of life, whatever that might be. And maybe you can describe vitality as what it's not. It's not having enough energy. It's not sleeping well. It's not having the right relationships. It's anything that kind of not living from a place of vitality is coming from a place that is, draining your soul. And so that's a multimodal approach, especially from a naturopathic perspective. That vitality and obtaining vitality, achieving vitality comes from good nutrition and good sleep and good mental health. And that's a step-by-step process, because I think most of us have been raised in a way that is not sustainable, meaning we have poor diets or we have poor sleep, and eventually that shit catches up with us, right? So I think what I do in my work here is start chipping away at things over time for people so that they're digestible. So you may not get to vitality right away, but at least you start working towards something that makes concrete strides to getting you feeling better, so you can go out and do the things that you want to do, whether that be play with your grandkids or or go run a marathon, or maybe just, hike the Pacific Crest Trail, whatever that happens to be for you. So I think a lot of vitality actually comes down to how does the person sitting in front of me define it for themselves.
Perfect. So I would define vitality as creating and living an amazing life. One of the things that I know is every human being goes through levels of trauma as they grow up. And in the work that I do with people, I get them to understand how we create this experience of life. Because if you think about your life experience, it's created inside of here, it's created in your head. And oftentimes it is based upon the things that have happened to you in the past. And with most of the people that I work with, or really all the people I work with, the minute you understand how you create your reality and the impact that the past has on this created reality, especially the traumas that have occurred to every person at a very young age, then you begin to process life different. And in the past, when you had anxiety and trauma, now you can actually see what was like, how the past impacts your now. You can say no to that impact and you can create an amazing life. And to me, vitality is living your dreams, doing that which you need to, not being in a PTSD spiral or an anxiety spiral. It is really understanding life to the point that you are the master of your fate.
Fascial counterstrain and in general counterstrain. So let's start with the basics. What is fascial counterstrain?
Fascial counterstrain is a way to reduce inflammation through manual therapy. And manual therapy means hands-on, and it's not like massage or rolfing. For those who are familiar with rolfing, they know, and they've been on a rolfing table and they know how painful it is. I've done it myself. I don't think I'll ever do it again. Counterstrain is not painful. It's indirect, as they say. We take the fascial glides in the direction of ease instead of pushing into them to create. That's a very Western way of approaching releasing things, is to push into them. This is a pulling away, and it allows the tissue to relax and to drain inflammation. And when we do that, number one, we download the chemicals that are causing pain signals, in addition to releasing the fascial constriction. Like fascia, that slimy covering that we think of, is actually around every single structure in the body, and it contracts. And if you, in the presence of inflammation, so if you, for example, let's use COVID. COVID, we know, creates an inflammatory storm, and some of those things lodge in the heart, those chemicals lodge in the lungs. If we have an adjustment, if you will, that can move the heart or lungs into a position where we can drain the inflammation from those areas, they'll be in less pain and the structures are going to work better. So, how would you feel if the arteries of your heart fed more blood to your heart? How would you feel if your lungs could expand greater and take in more air? The beauty of fascial counterstrain is its specificity in treating very specific things, like not just the arteries of the heart or the lungs or a bone, but also structures deep within the brain, arteries and veins of the brain, different areas of the brain, including the amygdala or the hippocampus, which are implicated in things like post-traumatic stress, treating the auditory areas, treating the balance areas, which, as we know from a physiological standpoint, are really overactive when somebody's hypervigilant from post-traumatic stress. So counterstrain is, again, hands-on. It's non-invasive. The person doesn't take any clothes off. They just take their shoes off, get on the table, and we do this work. And they get to experience something that's not painful and helps them feel better immediately. The woman I worked for in Paulsbo over on the Kitsap Peninsula just published a study showing that fascial counterstrain is effective for the symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And that bears repeating, that there is a manual therapy. This is the first study of its kind that shows a manual hands-on therapy can help people resolve post-traumatic stress symptoms. The study was done with veterans and first responders and was published in Military Medicine. And I think the fact that it was published in Military Medicine is important because they seem to recognize that this is something that our population needs and it's effective. So let's start telling people about this so we can get the word out about what counterstrain is and who it can help. And it's not just veterans and first responders. That's the group that I like to focus on, but it's important to understand that anybody who's had a chaotic childhood, who has undergone something traumatic, or some event like motor vehicle accidents, like everybody who's come in my office that has a motor vehicle accident has some sort of trauma that is associated with that event. Well, we have something that doesn't involve pharmaceuticals, doesn't, you don't have to eat right. You don't, so I can't say enough about how amazing something like this can be and what the potential of something like this could be.
Fascial counterstrain, or FCS, is a manual therapy showing promise for reducing PTSD symptoms by treating the nervous system's physical responses to trauma. Studies suggest that FCS can decrease sympathetic nervous system overactivity and inflammation, a key factor in PTSD, resulting in rapid improvements in PTSD, depression, anxiety, and somatic symptoms after just a few sessions. And something that you said in a previous interview that we did, and another provider, a hypnotherapist on the platform, echoed this, but you mentioned that we need to stop calling it post-traumatic stress disorder. Because if you're in war, the other thing that she mentioned that I found fascinating, and you just touched on it, is that not all veterans experience PTSD, and more people than just veterans experience PTSD. Jim was experienced SA as a child. And I think a lot more men experience SA than they're willing to talk about. And another thing that's fascinating about Jim is when you look at Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I'll speak real quick. I have a former client, his brother and the brother-in-law were there when the assassination took place. And that night, I actually did a Zoom session for 7 people in the family to process what they had said. And I love that. I love that redefinition of PTSD, doctor. I really do. And in under 3 hours, we had everything that they had witnessed processed, to where to this day, all 7 of those people do not have PTSD as a result of what 2 brothers and their brother-in-law witnessed. And before I go too much further, Dr. Barnes, thank you, because if you heard, she does not offer a pharmaceutical approach. This is what I love about naturopathic doctors, is they go at the body and they solve the problem there. I solve the problem in the mind, because when we understand the mind in conjunction with the healing of the body, what emerges is a whole person.
Yeah, and to your point, this is again another stat that approximately 14% of veterans reported having a substance abuse or having a substance use disorder in the past year, while other studies suggest higher rates of misuse, with one indicating nearly 20% of returning veterans have a substance abuse problem, and another finding 25% admit to misusing alcohol or prescription drugs. And that's what I love about what Dr. Barnes does, utilizing psychedelic medicine. There's an integration that also occurs, and that I love Jim to speak on.
I can only talk about my own personal experience with veterans and my own personal experience as a user. I don't shy away from talking about that. I hope that as research continues, that we will see some hard facts, based on the requirements to be published in America, with our Western boundaries, if you will, on what constitutes good research. But I think they're going to show that it's overwhelmingly positive. What's getting in the way is that there's a lot of bias and there's a lot of fear around what these things are and what their potential is. And I don't really have a lot to dissuade people, because it's like, well, what is your fear based on, and have you tried it yet? And if not, perhaps we could stop bashing it until you do actually try it yourself or look at some of the research that's out there. My personal experience is that it's been a mind-blowing part of my recovery back from what I would consider post-traumatic stress. And what we're using now is post-traumatic stress growth, or post-traumatic growth, meaning it's not enough to just heal, but how are you growing after you use these things? And the potential is basically unlimited. I think one of the pitfalls for people is they're constantly in this loop of healing, but there's got to be an end to healing. And that goes into what Jim was talking about, vitality and living your best life. I think psychedelics offer that. Whether you continue using them or not, just using them can help close the door on something that has been traumatic for you and open the door for something like I never imagined that life could be like this. So they're very powerful. I do acknowledge that they're not for everybody and that they do need to be done appropriately. Like having somebody come into your living room on a Saturday night to do a round of shrooms is not the type of work that I do. That's, that's valid if, recreational things are a thing. But the type of work I do and the type of work that a lot of veterans are doing in peer-led stuff or peer-led spaces is all about the appropriate use, the integration. Like, what do you do with those insights after you get them? How do you keep that ball rolling? And then what's not talked about a lot is the community that develops and the connection that develops, because really, I think true healing and then growth happens within the context of, I'm going to use the word tribe, but family, chosen family, as opposed to, blood family, or that group of people that's closest to you that you're allowed to be vulnerable with and lean on when times are hard. That the development of that cocoon, if you will, is very, very important to getting beyond the I need to heal and into the I am now vital and I'm grasping for the best that I can in life. But basically the experience so far that I have, both personally and professionally, is that these things have amazing potential. They're doing crazy good things, and it's about time that we blow the doors open on researching and making these things accessible. Because when you consider the difference between what is it, like 4,000 U.S. service members have died in Afghanistan and Iraq, and then 240,000 have died by self-selection. Like that ratio is not acceptable. We need to do more for folks that are choosing to die by suicide.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. I think the latest statistic I heard was 22 of our veterans or military people commit suicide every day. That is a problem. And one of the things, I'm a huge proponent of psychedelics, but one of the biggest, and I don't know where, I was actually on a board of a local psychedelic society that provided information and provided integration circles. And one of the things that we learned is 80+% of the transformation that occurs when you take psychedelics happens in integration. And integration is getting together with a peer group once you've done the psychedelic ceremony and talking about it and talking it through. And the more you integrate and get out of your head with these things and get into community or tribe or however you want to call it, once you get in there, that is where the healing deepens, and that is where you rewire the neurotransmitters in your brain, and you not only become more healthy, but then you live healthier as a result of that. So and I love the example, right? Hey, it's Saturday night. Let's do some shrooms, dude. That does not mean you're going to get healed. But if you do it among peers with a healing intention, right? Set and setting. What is the set that you're doing your psychedelics? And what is the setting? Have you created an intention? Are you sitting with somebody there that is there for the purpose of healing, which is far different from there because we're gonna talk to the trees and we're gonna talk to the grass. And no, it's like you actually create an intention to heal yourself. And I'm coming up on 6 years doing these with clients, and I actually have a men's group that for the last 2 years I've gone back to the East Coast, and last year as a group we just microdosed. We did some well, actually we did a little above, we did a little above a microdose, and it was amazing the impact that it had. And a lot of these men, there were 11 people in the circle, far majority of them are former military, and some are former law enforcement, and the difference it made was incredible. But we talked after. We had conversation about healing, because that is where your healing really sticks long term. And doctor, any thoughts about that you could add?
I think there are a lot of ways to use these medicines.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the criticism has been that these things are indigenous and they have a history of being used a certain way. I saw an interview with an indigenous elder who was quite upset about the idea of microdosing. And my answer to that would be, I think each culture needs to determine how they're going to use things in a way that best suits that culture. And because Western capitalistic culture is a certain way, then the medicine is only going to come in a certain way, and we're going to use it a certain way. But that said, I've done ceremonies that are all the way from completely off the grid, Ruwu, and then on the other hand, super clinical, and all of them have been effective for me. So
Okay.
I think I would say that it's like, who is the participant and what resonates with their soul on what's going to work for them. And in that way, it keeps the door open for that person to find the right set and setting that's going to work for them. I don't think any of these options should be taken off the table. Going down to Peru and doing something in the jungle might work for somebody and be unbelievably therapeutic and healing, while something super clinical like doing ketamine in a clinic in a group setting might also be very therapeutic, because from a Western mind, maybe that's safer and more approachable and palatable. So I'm open to all the different ways that we could use these things: microdosing, heroic dosing, stacking, whatever that happens to be. And that makes it an individual thing, which is beautiful, because every person heals differently. Every person finds vitality differently. And so let's keep it all on the table.
Yeah, I love that. And I have to tell you that back in 2006 and 2007, it was February 14th. It was Valentine's Day of 2006. I read an article about ayahuasca in the Peruvian jungle, and it so moved me that 3 weeks later, I was on a plane going down there. I've done 20 total ceremonies, or excuse me, 10 total ceremonies, 5 each trip down to Peru. And I will say, for me, and this is just for me, because I do not recommend ayahuasca. People come and say, I want to do ayahuasca. I'm like, no, you don't. You really don't. And we sit down and we talk about it. But in my 3rd ceremony was when I dealt with the sexual assault that happened to me as a child. And it was so profound. The healing was so different that I came back a different human. And for me, it worked. For other, I mean, I just, this was a new place that did it, because I ended up going back 9 months later. But in that first trip, there were only 6 people. And the first night we were in ceremony, about an hour into it, from across the room, one of the people starts yelling about all the pain, and then says that he had just had open heart surgery 3 weeks earlier, and he could not. He says, "This is really hurting my heart." And then you had one other person making sexual gestures and sexual innuendos towards another person in the circle, that the shamans walked over and they just did this thing over him with they gave him an akara, and then they went hoo, 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 and I don't remember what they said, but then they sat down, and 20 minutes later he was writhing and screaming. And when I got up the next morning, he and his friend were packing up. But for me, it was the perfect thing that I needed to do to heal the trauma inside my heart. And it's what really opened me up, because that December, because in December it will be 20 years. And I had the December before I went down to Peru. That's when I had begun my coaching. But once I had to heal, once I healed my issues up here through ayahuasca, that's when things changed. And it's funny because after that, in the late teens, I was really kind of against psychedelics. I'm not going to lie, but then I had to remember, oh yeah, that's something that you used, and it turned it around, because it is something that people should talk to people that have done it, and make sure it's right for you before you just hop on a plane and go down to Peru. And so, yeah.
Well, yeah. If I could interject real quick, I think it's also important to remember that if ayahuasca isn't for you, it's not your place to say whether it's right for somebody else or not right for somebody else. And that's some of the kickback that I've gotten from people, is that, well, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, it's not your place to tell me what's right for me.
Well, exactly. Each person has to figure out what's right for your heart and your soul, whether it's ayahuasca, mushrooms, MDMA, ketamine. I mean, personally, I've experienced MDMA once. I think I need to give it another shot because I didn't have the best experience with it. But a lot of people are very pro MDMA. But me, I've found that mushrooms are my thing.
And something I found really interesting, looking at all the stats to your point, is that it seems like statistically, versus with trials, MDMA has the most information on it, according to this stat right here. Clinical trials using MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for severe PTSD has shown a significant efficacy of up to 71 of participants in phase 3 no longer meeting the diagnostic criteria for PTSD, compared to 32% in the placebo group. And according to AI, but magic mushrooms is still in early stages, but preliminary studies have shown significant potential. See, for me, with my own journey, I've only done mushrooms, and it's helped me significantly.
Where does ketamine fit in there? Because ketamine is the one legal psychedelic that a lot of and doctor, you probably know more about ketamine.
Well, there is a lot of research out there about ketamine. And I think one of the important things to remember is that each of these substances has a different strength, meaning we find that ketamine is actually good for people who are in chronic pain. So there's a psychedelic therapy that could be good for somebody who's experiencing physical pain. Some substances are being studied for like substance use disorder. Iboga, which we haven't talked about yet, which is a very interesting, and I've done that myself. Talk about something that's not addictive. Oh yeah, I've done it twice. But that's being studied for things like dopamine-related diseases like Parkinson's and opioid addiction. So, and mushrooms are not being studied for opioid addiction. It's important to recognize that there are different things that these medicines do well. And as the research starts to blossom, and it'll pick up, I don't think it's going anywhere this time. We're going to find that different things are good for this sounds so scientific. Different things are good for different things. But whether something is effective for a thing is going to be dependent on what it is. So, you know, mushrooms may be good for depression or alcohol use disorder, whereas especially the veterans like the artillery guys and the naval aviators that I know that have had damage to their brains from pulling G's, you know, maybe something like ibogaine is the medicine of choice. I don't know how much research out there is on ayahuasca. I've done some searches and there is some, but anyway, there's much to be learned. And I think what we need to do is check back in a year and 5 years, and we're going to see a vastly different field of what's available in terms of clinical knowledge and then just cultural knowledge.
Yeah, 100%. And that's part of why we made this platform, because at the end of the day, people are going to do what they're going to do. They're going to try these things. But the more information that we have, the more people can make sound decisions. So I want to transition a little bit, because as a veteran, it's one of the few things in the U.S. where there really isn't anything that you can compare it to, right? Whether you're black, you're white, you're Spanish, you're gay. If you're a veteran, you're a veteran. And it's a knit community. They need to break the stigma.
Ways that we can heal without going to a pharmaceutical pill that we're going to get addicted to for our entire life. If you think about it, a lot of our past, you know, the past generations, they didn't have to take pills every morning. They created life. I mean, even if you take a look at the generation when I was growing up, we had to deal with boredom. These days, we have these little things right here that assist us to get addicted at a very young age to screens and screen time. And I think one of the things that alternative ways of looking at the health, whether it's with a naturopathic doctor or with a life architect, is between us. You're healing the body, you're healing the mind. And when you can shift your mindset, and then with all of the trauma that's happened, and let's say that you find that perfect psychedelic for you and it works, it's going to open up a life experience that you cannot imagine. And as that life experience opens up, you're going to want to give that to your neighbors, your friends, the people that you served with, right? Because what if we handled things differently and it wasn't just turning to a pill to numb us out, that we actually did things such that we create and live like this one wonderful life that we have? Go ahead, doctor, and then I'll wrap it up after you.
I think what I'm going to do is share a little bit about each of the modalities that I do and how they can help. Because one thing I wasn't able to talk about in this is NSI, which is neurosomatic intelligence. And neurosomatic intelligence is all about applied neurology to retrain your nervous system for safety, which if you're not into psychedelics, which, you know, good on you for knowing that, there are other modalities. And I love that you have hypnotherapy. I've done hypnotherapy myself. Like, tune into that. If you're going to watch the summit, tune into that, because hypnotherapy can be just as powerful at accessing some of the subconscious. But I look forward to doing a little bit of a deeper dive for the summit and sharing some of the modalities that I do. Yeah, and if anyone has questions or they have things that we'd want to answer, I would welcome that feedback in preparation for the summit.
Yes, beautiful. And I look forward, if you're listening or watching this, join the summit. Take a step into exploring all these different alternative ways to heal. I'll be speaking about the mind, and I'll be speaking to how we create this experience called life and the impact of traumas. But I look forward to sharing more. And I love interactions like this. So Dr. Barnes, thank you. DecentMed, thank you. And for all of you listening, thank you. Really look forward to assisting you to find your path for healing.
And make sure to subscribe to both their YouTube channels, the youtube.com/@alternativeflightplan and youtube.com/@AmazingLifeDesign. You can also visit their websites at AmazingLifeDesign.com for Jim, and meridianpassagewellness.com for Dr. Barnes. Thank you so much for joining us today. And this has been the latest episode of DecentMed Spotlight.